Okay, we are live. Episode number 5 of Honoring Her Spark. How's everybody doing today?
Wow.
Very good.
Good.
Good to see you, Jordan,
Good
Alicia.
to see you all today. So we have today's session is called Awareness, Remembrance, and Support. I'm your co-host Jordan Burnoff with the Aboriginal Friendship Center's Honoring Her Spark podcast. And I'm going to let Alicia Buckley, the other co-host, kind of introduce our guests and what we're going to be chatting about today. So thanks everyone for joining us.
Great. Thanks, Jordan. It's great to have everyone here. My name is Alicia Buckley. I'm a program director with the Aboriginal Friendship Centers of Saskatchewan. I spearhead Honoring Her Spark, which essentially is looking at economic security and prosperity for Indigenous women in a very holistic manner. But as part of that, we really focus on safety and focus on how we can help honor all of our inner sparks and all of those voices that have come before us and those that will come after us. So that's why we have two wonderful guests here, our partners in some of our initiatives. So we have Darlene and Myrna. I can't pronounce it, but I'm going to let you guys introduce Iskwewuk, your group of strong women leaders. So maybe Darlene, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Alicia and Jordan, for inviting Myrna and myself, representing Iskwewuk. I'm Darlene Rose Okemasim Sicotte. I'm from Beardies and Okamatsis First Nation. I've lived off reserve since I was about 15, went to girls' school in PA. And I'm really have compassion and love for our people. And this is work that I've been doing with MMIW as volunteer. And I'm really looking forward to what we can all share with the audience today.
Great. Thanks for joining us. Myrna, share a little bit about yourself.
Yes, good morning. My name is Myrna LaPlante. I live here in Saskatoon, and my roots are the Daystar First Nation and Tree 4. And my work consists a lot of volunteer and sometimes honorarium work with the MMIWG2S plus topics and projects and so on. I've been a member of Iskwewuk Ewichiwitochik since 2007 when my aunt Emily Osmond went missing. My involvement involved some activities prior to 2007 in regards to MMIW. But yes, it's been a journey since then, and been really actively involved in this file for many years, and seen a lot of changes, and we'll be talking about that today, and happy to be here. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So the reason why we wanted to title this podcast the way we did is it's really the pillars of your organization, your group, and being able to share and remember and commemorate those who have gone missing or have been murdered. We also we really wanted to focus today a little bit on making those connections and seeing how historic traumas have really influenced today's, I guess, circumstances and safety issues for Indigenous women. So maybe can we get started and share a little bit maybe about that historic timeline? I know finding over 6,000 of our children has been top of mind for many people, and we never know what that true number is going to be. We know it's going to get higher, but it's kind of hitting all of us deep in our hearts, but that's only just a small piece. So can you share a little bit about that historic timeline that's really influenced us today?
Yeah, I can go for a few minutes. I think the audience needs to be aware of how far back Indigenous women and Indigenous people have been impacted by colonization and contact. I think these relationships between men and women really began during the fur trade and during contact with that Victorian ways of doing things, and how the men took the lead and the women took the back seat. Whereas when they met with Indigenous people in this country, they met women that had leadership and matriarch societies, and kind of to fast track from that time to modern day, you had policies of the Indian Act, and you had residential schools, 60 Scoop, child welfare. It's a fast historical review, but it kind of leads up to where Iskwewuk developed and became an advocacy group, and predominantly on awareness, remembrance, and supports to families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. And we started that 16 years ago. So I think for people to understand historically how these relationships fell apart, and they continue to be embedded in policy and government, in systemic racism and colonization, that we still have a lot of work to do. And I'll just see what Myrna could add to our timeline and what Iskwewuk has done.
Well, for myself, my first activity in supporting family, that's going through the process of the court system and so on, was in the early 90s, and that was with the Pamela George case in Regina, where a group of us got really upset and angry about when the judge told the jury to keep in mind that that the work that Pamela was doing, and that was working in the sex trade, and to keep that in mind. We were really incensed by that, and should they have been found, should they have been acquitted, there would have been a very strong community reaction to that. So that was my first. I remember standing outside the courthouse and waiting for the verdict and so on. So that was our first, my first activity, and then of course when being out in the community when Amber Redmond went missing in 2005, and Darlene Bossy, who actually was a former employee of mine in my previous workplace, and she went missing in 2004. And supporting the family. I didn't know Herb and Pauline I didn't know them at all, and since then we've got to know them very good. So I mean, there's these activities, things like the Walk for Justice in 2008, really spearheaded, I think, across the country, because they've done about 7 walks across the country, or various parts of the country, and really raised the awareness and collected names and signatures that a lot of data did not reflect. In 2008, there was a missing persons conference. So since 2005, with the release of the Amnesty International and NWAC Stolen Sisters report, it really brought to light, although there was a lot of work and awareness that had been done for many years, especially in Vancouver and the downtown east side. Bernie Williams, Gladys Raddick, and people like that who are long-term advocates on this topic. And that time was really the beginning of the demand for the national inquiry into MMIW in 2007, 2008. And I mean, there's a lot of activities that lead up to, the national inquiry and so on. And I'll just stop there for now.
Great. Can you maybe share, I know, Darlene, you were talking a little bit before when we were preparing for this podcast about what some of those policies have really been to influence MIW and actually almost hinder the safety of our Indigenous people, especially women and Two-Spirit.
I think I'm not great with, what policies are out there. All we are aware of, because there's literally thousands of documents and reports on violence against Indigenous women and girls. But basically, it's the policies that are not moving forward in a timely fashion that meets the needs of Indigenous people and Indigenous women and girls and LGBTQ. And that's health, justice, policing, education, child welfare, economic development, housing, definitely a really big, about those 6 areas are about where we suffer the most as Indigenous people, where we're not have those essential services. And the essential service experience is what really makes us vulnerable to all of these systemic barriers and unsafe areas for Indigenous people. And I think if the general public, takes the time, and there's a lot of people that have that understanding. Our Indigenous people are, they're we don't need to convert them to understand this. We live this every day. They know what we need. They know what is lacking, and it's just our uh, our roles as advocates and having the lived experience that we can use those things together to try to change those policies and talk to government, talk to MLAs. Like yesterday, there was 150 people online talking to Minister Wyatt and McMorris and Ross from the government of Saskatchewan. It's a 2.5 hour thing, and they need to hear what we're saying and the kind of questions that we want them to follow up on MMIW, calls for justice, economic reconciliation. There's a lot for all of us to do, and especially for the calls for justice. There's 231 legal imperatives, and we're still on the margins of TRC, residential school survivors. And it's sadly, a lot of our people even see us in the margins. And it's just for us to constantly try to do this work together in a healthy, good way, take care of each other, and do trauma-informed, community-driven planning projects and community development.
Just a question on that, Darlene. So what is that connection? Like, where do you see the greatest overlap and connection between MMIW and residential schools and the work that, and maybe this is a question, Myrna, if you want to jump in as well, like where have you seen the greatest overlap, and from the negative perspective and the positives, how has that worked?
I'll just say what I've seen here in Saskatoon. In Saskatoon, I think, I'm going to say this proudly, I think Iskwewuk was Reconciliation Saskatoon 2005. We had to really navigate a city that was going through so much turmoil with policing at the time. We had many missing girls and mothers and aunts in this jurisdiction. And I think part of our Reconciliation Saskatoon participation when it began in 2016, we were able to use all of those skills and abilities to bring in that Reconciliation Saskatoon community to build on what we've done, but specifically to residential school survivors. And they had already been doing their own thing, but it's different to build a committee and awareness, and we had those abilities and skills, so we were able to do that at the beginning of Reconciliation Saskatoon. But still, there is that marginalization and overlook of MMIW still. And it's not to take away from the residential school graveyards that's been uncovered this past summer. It's just to remind people those are missing children. And it's all interconnected. And people will see that somewhat in our 60s MMIW documentary that'll be out this fall. So, and that's my thoughts.
I think, you really can't, talk at times, without referencing, these other, major, impacts on Indigenous people, especially like, you talk about, the child welfare system and the impacts when children have been removed from families and how that's impacted, the families, the parents, the mothers, and so on. access to education and training. Some people cannot access education and training. The loss of Indian status, not being able to go back to your home community, and even today, due to lack of housing, not being able to find housing, marginalizes a lot of our women. But I think the loss of Indian status, and I think slowly that's being a little bit rectified. Not all women are still even welcomed back to their own community, which is a huge error, I think, for our governments, our Indigenous governments, and so on. I mentioned the child welfare system, the 60 scoop, all these kinds of things have had topics. Have had huge impact on the lives of our Indigenous women, and then the subsequent fallout of that. Like, where do you go? You migrate to an urban situation. You might, there with no supports, and you being left to fend for yourself. Hopefully, with the calls for justice, and especially a huge discussion on safety of our women, that these will change, and that we'll be able to see some prevention of these tragedies happening. So that's we really can't talk about one without the other, and all these policies that are in place and that have prevented our women from some of our women from moving forward and living productive lives. Of course, we all know that addictions, mental health issues are huge on the radar, and we know that communities and governments are working to resolve that, and fingers crossed that these programs go ahead in full force, and they're going to be accessible to all of our Indigenous people.
You both hit on exactly what the conversation needs to be today, is that we can't talk about one without the other, and that we can't ever forget, because they're so interconnected. I know with even since contact and like the very first woman or child to go missing, and then how many children have been found now, all those children have been missing, and they're part of this conversation that we're having today. And so all these traumas and all this cultural loss and loss of identity and loss of ways has really started shifting our conversations, and that it's now, how do we help heal our generations? How do we do that? So I'm just wondering if you guys can pose a little bit as to what those resources or what's going on now are out there.
Well, right now, I think for Saskatoon, we have an advisory group that's been working with the Indigenous Relations Director for the city and the Reconciliation Coordinator. And we've had this advisory group since, I think, January. But we had been meeting, Myrna and I, earlier with the new staff there. And what we came up with, the city of Saskatoon, is that we did an RFP to do research and environmental scan on Saskatoon and the surrounding area on what we can do to involve the city of Saskatoon to make changes and include the calls for justice. That report came out July 2021, and it's had favorable responses. I think that's one area, and I think we might be one of the unique cities in the country that already has kind of an urban start to it, and maybe a budget by the fall to have a kind of a matriarch's office. I think that's a start. There is national funding that maybe Myrna could bring up that are very exciting. It's a lot, and it's all connected to the work she was doing on the National Survivors Circle.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate to be able to participate at the national level during the national inquiry as part of the National Family Advisory Circle, where we provided advice and guidance during the national inquiry from the family perspective. Um, we have to really remember in any of our circles and any of our tables, we must have family representation. So I'm hoping that with the discussions we had yesterday, the presentations that we heard yesterday, that the governments will look to the family perspective, and I just really want to emphasize that that's something that we want to push. And currently, I sit on the National Family and Survivors Circle, again advising on the development of the recently released National Action Plan, and we're now at, of course, in the implementation stage of implementing these action plans. The provinces and territories are on board, and it's great to see that yesterday, for example, that the province of Saskatchewan is dialoguing, listening, and talking about how we go forward. There's some funding announcements, and I wish that I could add the links, but I don't have the savvy right now to do that.
Well, that's okay.
but
We can always add the links later, Myrna. I'll grab those from you, and we'll put them in the comment section.
Great. Yes. There's funding for Indigenous-led data research, and the government is looking to receive lots of funding proposals. Keep an eye on the deadline dates. So some are at the end of September. There's substance use and addictions, a comprehensive violence prevention strategy, and support for the well-being of families and survivors. That looks really exciting. And also funding for cultural spaces. So have a look at those. We'll post them, and we'll hopefully we'll have a lot of submissions. And those are some of the things that are coming up.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Darlene and Myrna. There are a few links in the comment section, so go and find some of the reports that we've been talking about and some of the articles as well. And then later on, we'll also be sharing kind of a little bit what Myrna talked about in terms of available funding for research and whatnot. But if anybody has any questions, please go to the comment section, and maybe you're going to miss the live version of this and you're seeing it later, but post your questions in here, and Myrna and Darlene, we can kind of point those off to you guys for your expertise. If you have time to answer them afterwards, I'm sure listeners would be very, very appreciative of that. But yeah, these women are a wealth of knowledge, so put your questions in here, guys and gals.
I think, it's just to start the dialogue, like you said, is where we need to start. Having simple podcasts like this or having conversations in your own homes is something to start off with. I think that there's a lot of things going out there, whether it's access to funding or even being a social media influencer. There's so many different ways that people can raise awareness to really help bring this more to light and make sure that no voices are ever not heard, or make sure that those that have been lost, that we're able to give them voice again. So I know that this is something that people always ask, well, I don't even know where to start. What do I do? So what are things that you guys, that either Darlene, both of you, and Myrna can share that people can start off right away?
I'd like to just talk about ambiguous loss. I think part of, for people to understand the lived experience of the missing person and their family, is that the fact that they're living with a situation where they don't have any closure, they don't have any clear understanding of what's happening, they're in trauma state, they have to work with the justice system, and it leaves them always asking questions and never for the longest time, or maybe shorter times, never getting answers to those questions. So it makes it very complicated and, very difficult to navigate. And there's always a long delay of their grieving and their closure. And it's a lot of unresolved grief. And we don't really know in each case what's happened to that missing person. There is about 6 different ways a person can go missing. It's not automatic that it's foul play. It could be an accident, or they could have been human trafficked, or they could be just not want to be seen. There's other reasons, but for the most part, is for the general public to understand that, that family that has that missing person. There's usually about a dozen or more attached to that family that are all impacted by that missing person. Like just behind me back here is a walk from Chelsea Poorman, who went missing just 6 weeks after arriving in Vancouver a year ago. And they did a walk over there. They did a walk in Saskatoon. So I think for people just to be aware of constantly of these missing persons cases or walks is just so helpful to families.
Thanks, Darlene.
I'd like to expand on ambiguous loss, and from my perspective, my aunt has been missing since 2007. No information whatsoever of where she is or what might have happened. There's absolutely nothing. And then we had our nephew go missing in 2011. He was located in last year, 2020, and in the area that he was last known to be, and there was deemed no foul play. But how I describe this is it's like attending one long funeral. That's how I feel. And, numerous searches, many trips out to the Muscogee First Nation and our homelands, and all the countless times women out there. And it's like, you're coming home from a funeral. That's what it felt like for me. So, we know what families are going through. We know this, we experience it, we live it. But I'd like to shift to some of the, what can people do now? Well, they can call Iskwewuk. We're always welcome to have people join us on the activities. We have October 4th Vigil coming up again, and we're in the planning stages for that. If family needs help, there's the Family Information Liaison Units within the government, and also with the FSIN and the Métis. We know that RITSIS, the Regina Treaty Status Services in Regina through Erica Bowden, has, they've got therapy programs, and they do a really good support for MMIW families. There's the FSIN Women's Commission, there's always lots of information on websites and so on. So call us, we can direct too. And even, Alicia's program can guide and direct people as to where, if they're looking for information, or if they want to help out, if they want to do work, we welcome.
Yeah, there's lots of different events, walks. I know Missing Persons Week is coming up, that both Iskwewuk and AFCS are actually doing 2 different events that week. There's Sisters in Spirit, which is there's going to be some local events, but there's some national ones that you can join online. There's Red Dress Day. I know that we're gonna be able to, even for Sisters in Spirit as well, do some more opportunities with the Princess Shop and really ensure that families and survivors have an opportunity to wear a red dress, share their story, and empower themselves to feel beautiful. And so we're going to do that again. There's just so many other things that people can reach out to either your organization or AFCS or even SciCap to see what else can be out there to get in touch and figure out how you can help, whether it's donating time or funding or even just being, like you both said, that understanding and just having that empathy is something to start with as well.
I just want to say that, from 2007, when we very first started searching for our aunt, in October and getting very, very little response for help, and having to go it alone in our family and not having any resources whatsoever. From that point to 2020, 2021, and you see lots of resources, lots of people out, much, people respond very quickly. And of course, social media has certainly played a key role in that, in terms of getting information out. It's just great to see the amount of awareness and people willing to help and participate and so on. So I'm just so impressed with how far we've come, but we still have lots of work to do. And really encourage people to just get out and support in whatever way they can, even if it's donating a flat of water to an event.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing, and without getting political, but we have an election coming up, and I think looking at the different platforms from all of the candidates and, who's taking Indigenous rights as a part of their platform, and specifically MMIW and residential school survivors. I've been seeing a lot on social media about one of the questions being, should there be clean drinking water on all First Nations in Canada? And it's like, is that a debate question? Like, really? And some of these things, like, it's just wild what happens. But
it goes back to the essential service rights that we have as Indigenous people. Like, why should urban and metropolis Canada have all those rights and not us in our own country? And that was a part of an expert hearing presentation by I think Metallic. She's a professor out east, and it was really, really good for her to share that expert knowledge. That's where that comes from, is that we don't have the same essential services as everybody else in the country. During the inquiry, that's what she presented to everyone.
Yeah, I think I guess one of my closing comments, on the topic is kind of a message for listeners and to you guys. I think this is such important and special work that you do, and to my co-host Alicia, like, you guys work tirelessly to support women and to support communities. And for me, like, in my community, suicide is a big thing. And you talked about ambiguous loss and those different ways that people can go missing. And for me, that's kind of one of those ways. And it's almost like youth and people have become neutralized almost to what's happening, and so when we experience these losses, and I know this might be a little bit different from that firsthand experience that you explained, Myrna, of, it feels like a long funeral that you've attended. Like, it's interesting when I talk to friends and family about, grieving and going through this loss. It's hard and it's tough, but it's almost like it's never a surprise, and that's just so tragic. But I just want people to remember to stay hopeful and to look at the beautiful work that you women do and that you continue to do, and just, reach out and talk to people. There's so much good in this world, so much good. And so from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys so much. Hi, Kanaskumtin. So if there's anything closing that our guests or Alicia would like to say.
I think part of healing and moving forward and being resilient is engage in the arts. Get some recreation and inspiration from singers, dancers, performers, even these walkers that walk across the country for various things. These are all inspiring, and it just lifts me up to see that resilience. Like Patricia Ballantyne, Walk for Residential School, her sorrow. I watched that all summer, and I'm just so happy and proud of her for doing that she did so humbly and loving. That's what I want to leave with everyone.
Mm-hmm. I would really encourage people to do whatever self-care activities that work for you. There's a lot of resources in our communities, maybe some more so, of course, in maybe urban centers and some of the rural centers. But I know that bands, tribal councils, probably Métis communities, have much more of an emphasis now on health and wellness than in years past, and I know that they're doing some good works out there. So take care of yourself.
Both, all of you, with words of wisdom. I guess just my closing thoughts is we should all take a couple minutes every day to have a moment of silence for those who are gone, or we just don't know where they are. But also, like you said, give them voice as well. So as much as that silence rings in our head, it's an option just to give them that space that they need to have. So ensuring that we're able to do that and give voice to all of our Indigenous women and all of our girls and all of our 2S LGBTQ+. Okay, well, I think we're good to go. If there's any other questions, I know we've had a couple of comments come up, but please feel free to reach out to any time where we're able to answer any questions moving forward, or even if you just want to start that conversation with us, we're more than happy to do that.
And in the comments, you'll see there's a few events posted. Thank you, Linda Gale.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alicia and Jordan, for inviting us.
Yes, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
I'm just inspired by you young, beautiful women.
Yeah.
It's just warms my heart that you're doing this conversation with the public.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, ladies, so much. And prayers to all our girls, our women, our LGBTQ2S+ community. And for our men, everyone needs to continue to do the work. So, hi. Take care, everybody.
Thanks.